it just makes me want to cry. It's horrible.
Berks County District Attorney John Adams holding back tears this afternoon after revealing the disturbing details of the murders of 3 members of the same family.
I don't think that any of us can imagine the tragedy that took place here and how horrific this crime was.
On the night of September 12, 2025, in Reading, Pennsylvania, 31-year-old Geraldina Peguero Monchebo and her 1-year-old son vanished without a trace. Days later, her partner was discovered with a fatal gunshot wound, and then Geraldina's body was found in a field in Ontelaunee Township, followed by her son's body in a marshy area less than 200 yards away. Investigators swiftly classified the deaths as homicides. A 61-year-old man, already under arrest for the partner's murder, now stands accused of orchestrating this triple tragedy. Yet many questions remain unanswered. What was the motive? What was the nature of the relationship between the victims and the suspect? How did these 3 lives end up in 3 separate locations? The darkness of this case is deep, the timeline complex, and the truth is still being uncovered. Every case starts with evidence and ends with truth. We examine facts, not theories, details, not drama. This is Sunday Crime, where investigations speak for themselves. Subscribe now and stay updated as we uncover fact behind every case. Geraldina Peguero Monchebo was born in the Dominican Republic in the early 1990s. Like many others from her homeland, she sought better prospects abroad. She immigrated to the United States with limited resources, pursuing stability for herself and her son. In Reading, Pennsylvania, she built a modest life, working long hours and sending money to her family back home. Her neighbors and friends described her as quiet, reserved, and deeply protective of her child. She was careful with her social circle, rarely allowing anyone new into her personal life. At the time of her death, Geraldina lived with her partner, Junior Cabrera Colon, and their 1-year-old son, Jaden Jr. Financial strain was constant. She juggled bills, rent, and remittances to the Dominican Republic. Despite the stress, she remained focused on securing a future for her son. Jaden Jr. Peguero was only 1 year old. Family members described him as healthy and cheerful, a child who represented renewal for Geraldina. For her, he was the purpose behind every difficult decision. He embodied her hopes in a foreign country that promised safety and opportunity, but often delivered struggle and uncertainty. Junior Cabrera Colon, aged 31, was also from the Dominican Republic. He had lived in Reading for several years, holding warehouse jobs to support his small family. To acquaintances, he appeared social yet private, often avoiding discussions about his personal affairs. He and Geraldina shared a small apartment in Reading, balancing work and childcare. Their relationship, while not widely discussed, was known among neighbors to be stable but financially pressured. The household survived on modest means and kept largely to themselves. Reading, Pennsylvania, is a small working-class city marked by economic hardship and resilience. It has a large Dominican immigrant population, with many residents working in warehouses or service industries. Families often share tight living spaces, pooling income to afford rent. Violence in the city, while not constant, is not unfamiliar. Police frequently respond to domestic disputes, drug activity, and isolated homicides. Geraldina's apartment sat on a quiet street where neighbors recall little commotion. She was rarely seen outside except to go to work, shop, or take her son for walks. Locals in the community remember her as one of the many immigrants who came to Reading for low-wage work in factories along Route 61 and nearby industrial areas. Many of those jobs link back to other individuals later connected to this case. The same network of workplaces, friends, and acquaintances formed a web that investigators would later have to untangle. On September 12, 2025, Geraldina and her son were last seen leaving their Reading apartment. Surveillance footage in the area showed her carrying her son, dressed casually, walking toward a vehicle believed to belong to someone she knew. She was not seen again. That night, friends attempted to reach her by phone. The calls went unanswered. By morning, her cell went straight to voicemail. Concern spread quickly among her acquaintances, and relatives in the Dominican Republic began reaching out to police after 24 hours of silence. The Reading Police Department initiated a missing persons report and began tracking her digital trail. Her final phone ping registered in the northern outskirts of Reading, near Ontelaunee Township, a rural area known for its open fields and sparse traffic. Meanwhile, her partner, Junior Cabrera Colon, also disappeared that same day. His co-workers reported that he failed to show up for his shift and had not called in sick. Investigators soon realized the two disappearances might be connected. On September 13, 2025, police were dispatched to a scene near Reading where a male body had been found along a roadway. The victim was later identified as Junior Cabrera Colon. He had suffered a fatal gunshot wound. The crime scene showed no signs of robbery. His wallet and identification remained. Near his body, detectives recovered a single 9mm shell casing. This small piece of evidence would later become central to the investigation. Initial findings suggested that Cabrera Colon may have known his killer. There were no indications of forced interaction, implying he met the person willingly before the confrontation escalated. Investigators quickly reviewed his phone records and found his last communications included calls and texts with two individuals, Geraldina and an older man named Jose Luis Rodriguez, age 61, also from Reading. Rodriguez's name appeared several times in both Cabrera Colon's and Geraldina's phone histories, suggesting familiarity among the three. Detectives visited Rodriguez's residence for questioning. He admitted to knowing both victims, claiming they were acquaintances from work. According to his statement, he last saw them days before the incident. However, inconsistencies in his timeline began to draw attention from investigators. In the days following Cabrera Colon's discovery, police broadened their search northward for Geraldina and her son. Community members distributed flyers and posted appeals on social media. A week passed with no significant leads. Then, on September 19th, a local resident reported a disturbing sight near East Huller Lane in Ontelaunee Township, a figure lying in the tall grass. Responding officers found the body of a woman, later confirmed to be Geraldina Peguero Manchebo. She was partially clothed, showing signs of trauma but no gunshot wounds. The area was isolated, surrounded by overgrown vegetation and shallow marshes. It was clear the body had been placed there deliberately. Roughly 150 yards away, on September 20th, search teams discovered the body of a toddler in a marshy section of the same field. The child, Jaden Jr., was pronounced dead at the scene. Autopsies conducted on September 22nd confirmed both Geraldina and her son were victims of homicide. Investigators did not immediately release details of the cause of death of the child, citing the sensitivity of the case. What they did disclose was that the evidence pointed to deliberate actions, not accidental causes. The timing of the deaths suggested that both victims had been killed within days of Cabrera Colon's murder, with 3 deaths within 1 week. Each connected to the same household. Detectives considered whether one individual could be responsible. Ballistics analysis tied the 9mm shell casing found at Cabrera Colon's crime scene to a handgun registered to Jose Luis Rodriguez. Further forensic testing revealed traces linking Rodriguez to the Ontelaunee Township field, where the mother and child were found. As evidence accumulated, police charged Rodriguez with the homicide of Junior Cabrera Colon. Additional charges related to the deaths of Geraldina and her son remained under review pending completion of forensic reports.
Our top story, one man charged with the murder of an entire family tonight. Investigators laid out their case for a crime they call cruel and horrifying. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Jacqueline London.
I'm Fred Shropshire. This investigation has unfolded over several weeks as police discovered the bodies of a father, mother, and 1-year-old child at crime scenes in 2 different towns.
NBC 10's Brian Sheehan is joining us live in Reading with the new details we learned about the suspect and the killing of this family. Brian.
Yeah, even seasoned law enforcement officials are having a difficult time grappling with the details of this case. We are at a growing memorial for one of the victims, a husband and father whose body was the first to be found, but authorities now say he was the last to be killed the day after his wife was shot and their baby boy was thrown into a lake while he was still alive.
I don't think that any of us could imagine the tragedy that took place here and how horrific this crime was.
Longtime Berks County District Attorney John Adams laying out the disturbing details of the triple murder of members of the same family, a 31-year-old couple and their 1-year-old son, Jaden.
Defenseless 1-year-old.
Adams says Jose Luis Rodriguez confessed to killing Geraldina Peguero Mancebo and Jaden on September 12th and her husband, Junior Cabrera Colon, the next day. Court documents lay out a potential motive, stating Rodriguez told investigators he planned the deaths of the mother and son because Geraldina was taking his money and because she refused to leave her husband.
During an interview with the defendant admitted to having some sort of relationship with Geraldina.
Authorities say Rodriguez told them he drove the two to a brushy field in Antalani Township where he first shot Geraldina in the head.
The defendant then took Jaden down the street and threw him in a lake close to where Geraldina had been killed. The defendant confirmed that Jaden was alive when he threw him face down in the muddy water.
Geraldina's family reported her and Jaden missing later that night. Then Rodriguez allegedly told authorities he got into a physical altercation with Cabrera Colon the next morning during an argument over Geraldina.
Rodriguez told the police that during this altercation, a gun was knocked out of Cabrera's hand, and that Rodriguez picked up the gun and fired one shot at Cabrera, hitting him in the back of the head.
Reading police first found Cabrera Colon's body in Bear Park later on September 13th, while also searching for Geraldina and Jaden. Adams says Rodriguez eventually confessed to placing the body there after detectives showed him surveillance video of his vehicle near the park. Geraldina's body was found by police on September 19th and Jaden the next day. And authorities found Geraldina and Jaden by pinging her cell phone. Adams says Rodriguez told detectives where to find Geraldina's purse and phone and the gun used to shoot her, which we are told he obtained illegally. He is facing 3 counts of first-degree murder in this case, and authorities tell us they are possibly pursuing, the death penalty. Live in Reading tonight, I'm Brian Sheehan, NBC 10 News.
Authorities stated publicly that Rodriguez was a person of interest in the triple homicide investigation. News of the killing spread through Reading's Dominican community and beyond. Local and Dominican media outlets covered the story extensively, focusing on the tragedy of an immigrant family wiped out within days. A fundraiser was organized to repatriate the victims' bodies to the Dominican Republic for burial. The Reading Police Department and the Berks County District Attorney's Office continued their investigation, working to determine the motive behind the killings and whether additional individuals were involved. The case remains active, with prosecutors reviewing evidence to decide on further charges. What began as a missing persons report evolved into a triple homicide that exposed hidden tensions within a small immigrant community and left investigators tracing the final movements of 3 lives cut short in Pennsylvania's quiet heartland. Between September 14th and 18th, 2025, 30-year-old Geraldina Peguero Mancebo and her 1-year-old son, Jaden, vanished from Reading, Pennsylvania. Flyers flooded the community as friends and relatives, both in the U.S. and the Dominican Republic, pleaded for help. Local Dominican organizations and social media amplified their photos. Every lead that came in was chased, yet there was no trace. No phone activity, no digital footprint, no witnesses able to confirm their location. The disappearance grew increasingly concerning when police linked Geraldina to a homicide that had occurred days earlier. On September 13th, police had discovered the body of Junior Cabrera Colon, Geraldina's partner, inside a Reading residence. He had been shot once in the torso. Investigators initially treated the case as an isolated domestic dispute. But when Geraldina and her child went missing the following day, the pattern began to shift. Detectives began reviewing Cabrera Colon's phone records and messages, noticing recent exchanges with a man named Jose Luis Rodriguez, age 61, who had been seen with the family multiple times in the weeks prior. Rodriguez, a warehouse worker who lived in Reading, told police he knew Geraldina casually. He described himself as a family friend and denied involvement in her disappearance. Detectives, however, found inconsistencies in his statements, especially about his last contact with her. Surveillance footage from a nearby gas station places vehicle within proximity to Geraldina's home on the night she was last seen. As phone records, digital pings, and security cameras were analyzed, a timeline emerged suggesting Rodriguez's movements closely matched those of the missing family. During these 5 days, public search efforts intensified. Police canvassed wooded areas and waterways in Berks County. The Reading Police Department coordinated with county and state authorities. Volunteers gathered near the city's outskirts, distributing flyers printed in English and Spanish. Family members in the Dominican Republic held virtual vigils, fearing that the silence surrounding Geraldina's disappearance pointed to something far more sinister. On September 19, 2025, at approximately 8:15 p.m., a driver traveling along East Huller Lane in Ontelaunee Township noticed what appeared to be a human form in tall grass beside the road. Police arrived at the location and confirmed the worst. The body of a woman, later identified as Geraldina Peguero Manchebo, was found lying face down, partially concealed by vegetation. She had suffered a single gunshot wound to the head. There were clear indications the body had been moved post-mortem. Her belongings, including purse, phone, and identification, were missing. The following day, September 20th, search teams expanded their operation into the nearby wetlands. About 150 yards from where Geraldina's body was recovered, a K-9 unit located a smaller body, partially submerged in water. It was her 1-year-old son, Jaden Jr. Peguero. The area was cordoned off immediately, and the coroner's team took possession of both victims. Initial autopsy findings provided a grim picture. Geraldina's cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head, consistent with an execution-style killing. Jaden's autopsy revealed the presence of mud and water in his lungs, confirming that he had been alive when placed in the water. Both deaths were ruled homicides. On September 22, 2025, official autopsy results were released by the Berks County Coroner's Office. All 3 individuals, Cabrera Colon, Geraldina, and Jaden, had been killed within a 72-hour period. The killings were linked through ballistic evidence and cell phone analysis. Detectives identified the same 9mm caliber weapon as being connected to both adult victims. Investigators traced this weapon to Rodriguez. Following Cabrera Colon's murder on September 13th, Rodriguez had been taken into custody for questioning and subsequently charged with a homicide after ballistic testing matched a recovered handgun found in his residence to shell casings at the scene. Upon a secondary search of the wooded area near his property, officers recovered additional evidence: Geraldina's phone, purse, and passport concealed in a plastic bag. Digital forensics also revealed Rodriguez's vehicle had traveled to Ontelaunee Township during the same time frame Geraldina and Jaden were last active on phone networks. The GPS route aligned closely with the site where both bodies were discovered. Based on this evidence, Rodriguez was officially charged on September 29th with 2 additional counts of homicide for the deaths of Geraldina Peguero Manchebo and Jaden Jr. Peguero. Rodriguez, 61, resided alone in a small apartment in Reading. He had no prior criminal record and was described by former co-workers as quiet and reclusive. Records show he had met Geraldina through their shared employment at a warehouse several years earlier. Co-workers later told detectives that Rodriguez often spoke about Geraldina, describing her as someone he wanted to help start over. Investigators learned he had assisted her financially, paying rent, offering rides, and purchasing groceries. He reportedly began referring to her as his partner, though Geraldina never publicly confirmed such a relationship. According to court filings, Rodriguez told investigators that he had been betrayed. He claimed Geraldina accepted his help but refused to end her relationship with Cabrera Colon. Detectives concluded that Rodriguez's fixation escalated into resentment and, ultimately, violence. Evidence indicates the killings were premeditated. Cabrera Colon was shot first, likely during a confrontation at his residence. Geraldina and her child were then abducted, transported north of Reading, and killed separately. Interviews, text messages, and voice notes revealed that Rodriguez had grown increasingly possessive in the weeks leading up to the murders. He expressed anger over Geraldina's unwillingness to leave her partner and made threats implying that if he couldn't have her, no one would. Investigators believe Rodriguez planned the killings over several days, waiting for an opportunity. when the family was isolated. The sequence of crimes demonstrated control and deliberate staging. The murder of the infant was interpreted by investigators as an attempt to eliminate all remaining connections to the adult victims. Prosecutors later described it as an effort to erase every trace of the family's existence, ensuring no witnesses or surviving relatives could tie Rodriguez to his actions. The investigation uncovered a calculated pattern across multiple locations. Cabrera Colon's body was found in Reading City, establishing the first crime scene. Geraldina and Jaden were later discovered in Ontelaunee Township, approximately 10 miles away. The physical separation between these scenes suggested premeditation and a clear effort to obscure connections between the murders. Rodriguez's vehicle GPS showed stops between both sites, further confirming transportation and disposal. Surveillance cameras captured Rodriguez's car traveling northbound late at night, matching the timeline of the victim's last known movements. Physical evidence, soil samples, vegetation fragments, and fibers linked the trunk of his car to the field where Geraldina was found. The level of coordination and concealment reflected planning rather than impulsive violence. As of late September 2025, Jose Luis Rodriguez remains in custody facing 3 counts of homicide and related charges. Authorities continue to analyze his digital communications to reconstruct the precise order of events. The Berks County District Attorney's Office is pursuing the case as a triple homicide motivated by jealousy and control. The Reading and Dominican communities have since organized multiple vigils, and fundraising efforts for the repatriation of the victims remains to the Dominican Republic. The case continues to draw attention as investigators finalize the evidentiary timeline leading to trial. Each development brings new clarity to a sequence of calculated acts that transformed an intimate relationship into a pattern of violence extending across 2 cities. The investigation into the deaths of Geraldina Peguero Monchebo, her son Jaden Jr. Peguero, and Junior Cabrera Colon was managed by several law enforcement agencies in Pennsylvania. The Reading Police Department initiated the search after Geraldina and her son were reported missing. When their bodies were later discovered, Berks County detectives and the Northern Berks Regional Police joined the case. The Pennsylvania State Police Crime Lab conducted forensic analysis that linked the evidence from all 3 crime scenes. Ballistic testing confirmed that the same firearm was used in both adult homicides. The shooting of Cabrera Colon in Reading and the killing of Geraldina found days later in Ontelaunee Township. Investigators retrieved mud samples from the tires of Jose Luis Rodriguez's vehicle that matched the soil composition from the dump site near East Huller Lane. Cell tower data placed Rodriguez's phone at 3 key locations: the Reading residence where Cabrera Colon was killed, the area where Geraldina's body was dumped, and the nearby marsh where her son's remains were recovered. The alignment of digital and physical evidence allowed detectives to consolidate the timeline and connect Rodriguez to all 3 deaths. Public reaction was immediate. Members of the Dominican community in Pennsylvania and abroad organized vigils, expressing collective grief and shock. A candlelight ceremony was held in Reading days after the bodies were found. Across social media, messages and tributes appeared under the phrase Geraldina Y Su Angelito. In the Dominican Republic, family members initiated a GoFundMe campaign to repatriate the remains, eventually collecting over $8,000. Dominican news outlets carried the story under the headline Familia Dominicana Assassinata in Pennsylvania, drawing international attention to the killings. As the investigation concluded, the Berks County District Attorney's Office filed multiple charges against Jose Luis Rodriguez. These included 3 counts of first-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, and several firearms violations. District Attorney John T. Adams publicly described the case as a crime almost beyond comprehension. Rodriguez was detained at Berks County Prison without the possibility of bail. Prosecutors indicated the case might qualify for capital punishment, depending on the court's evaluation of aggravating circumstances. A preliminary hearing was scheduled, and law enforcement confirmed that Rodriguez acted alone, though they continued reviewing possible prior threats or incidents that might explain the escalation. Despite the evidence gathered, investigators and the public were left with unresolved questions. Did Rodriguez follow or surveil Geraldina before the killings? Were there behavioral or communication warnings that no one reported? Why did he target not just his adult victims, but also a child? The exact sequence of events between September 12th and 13th remains uncertain, leaving a critical gap in the timeline. Authorities also examined whether there were opportunities for early intervention, such as prior domestic disputes, that could have prevented the outcome. Following the conclusion of forensic examinations, Geraldina's body was transported back to Santo Domingo for burial. Her son, Jaden, was interred beside her in the same coffin, a decision shared publicly by relatives as an act of unity. Photographs of the funeral circulated through Dominican news outlets and social media. Cabrera Colon's family, located in both Pennsylvania and the Dominican Republic, released statements urging continued pursuit of justice. Immigrant support organizations in Reading called for expanded resources for victims of domestic violence, particularly for recent immigrants with limited access to language services and legal protection. Local authorities face questions about their handling of missing person protocols and communication gaps within the community. The case exposed structural issues within the system. Many residents argued that Geraldina's disappearance was not treated with sufficient urgency, possibly due to cultural or linguistic barriers. Advocacy groups pointed out that such delays often affect undocumented or recently immigrated families. The triple homicide thus became more than a local tragedy. It reflected the vulnerabilities faced by marginalized populations living far from their home countries. As of October 2025, Rodriguez remains in custody awaiting trial. Prosecutors continue reviewing additional forensic evidence, including digital forensics from recovered phones and GPS data, to reinforce the timeline. The district attorney's office has not yet announced whether it will pursue the death penalty or life imprisonment without parole. The investigation remains technically open until all forensic results are finalized. The thematic assessment of this case highlights recurring social dynamics. The alleged motive, rooted in jealousy and control, illustrates a cycle of possessiveness that often ends in violence. The victims, immigrants navigating a new environment, had limited avenues for protection or community outreach. Systemic obstacles such as language barriers, social isolation, and fear of law enforcement interactions prevented early warning signs from surfacing. The tragedy extended beyond immediate family, resonating through both Pennsylvania's Dominican population and communities abroad. 3 lives were lost, but the consequences echoed through institutions and families still confronting questions of accountability. In the story's closing sequence, the East Huller Lane field stands quiet again. Grass has grown over the soil, disturbed by the investigation. The voiceover underscores a lingering silence. 3 lives ended across 10 miles of Pennsylvania countryside. The questions left behind are heavier than the silence that follows. Geraldina Peguero-Manchebo's story is not only about what was lost, it's about what was ignored and the cost of not seeing danger until it's too late. Facts verified. Case concluded. Justice is found in what remains proven. This is Sunday Crime. Until the next investigation. Subscribe for more verified stories and real criminal investigations.